Bartholomew Town, bringing Rhode Islanders closer to their world since 2018. Brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Newport Film, Half Street Group, Navigant Credit Union, and the Audubon Society of Rhode Island.
Bartholomew Town.
Welcome into Bartholomew Town. We continue our coverage of the housing crisis here in Rhode Island, which is certainly nuanced in many different ways, and we've dug into some really, I would say, highly specific, hyper-specific aspects of this crisis over these last years as we've really been putting a focus on what is one of the major problems that we face societally, specifically here in Rhode Island. And look, there's also, in addition to some of these, hey, drill down on fine points, there's also some major thematic issues that we face, some major thematic problems. And one of them right now that we're seeing more and more of is what you would describe as unfair, unjust, without due process evictions in tandem with arbitrary rent hikes that then render what is someone's home, frankly, either unaffordable or barely affordable. So that, of course, a major problem. Legislation is looking to try and find a way to solve this continuing problem. Legislation is an act relating to property, the Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. On the House side, this is Reps Cruz, who joins us today, Potter, Morales, Giraldo, Stewart, Felix, Tanzi, Batista, John Lombardi, and Agello. So let's begin here by getting both of our guests to sort of identify themselves and their voices, and we'll start with Rep Cruz.
Hi, thanks for having me, Bill. Yes, my name is Representative Cherie Cruz from Pawtucket, same place where I was born and raised, and we're rented mostly all my life. So, I'm a renter. One of the few renters in Rhode Island, I think the only one with historical context as a renter in this state, and have seen just what you have laid out nicely too is, the rent hikes that are going much higher than our wages. The conditions of our units. We have old stock, and retaliation just for simply asking to have habitable dwellings, right, that we're paying for in the form of apartments. So that's being who I am and where I'm from and what I'm seeing happening, and seeing the homelessness increase within our state exorbitantly, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows and everyone who's listening, is that coming from that perspective, we have to do something, right? And that's where this just cause eviction protection legislation came in. It's really about fairness, stabilizing our communities, and really preventing homelessness. And that's what it's about. Again, we are seeing this phenomenon, especially in our state, where large corporate landlords are coming in and they're taking over. We're well over 50% now. Our small, quote, mom and pops are being eaten alive, just like us as tenants. And this is really about, protecting all of us. Again, not only tenants, even our small mom and pops, from these corporate landlords and real estate investors who, they're owning, 50, 100, 300, 1,000 units at a time while we've got, everyday working class Rhode Islanders struggling to just buy their first home. And they're really taking over this market. And again, this is why we need to do something.
Yeah, Rep, I couldn't agree more. And, I'm reminded of a couple of things. Number one, a lot of this conversation seems to revolve, correctly so, by the way, around short-term rentals. And we see in Newport where people own dozens of homes and they turn them into these irregular hotels, forcing would-be or at one point tenants out of those homes, and in some cases out of the city altogether. But this is a major problem. This is a national trend that we've seen, where whether it be hedge funds, international investors, or other conglomerates acquiring housing, and it just feels like, what's next? Are we going to start bottling the air? So it leads to a broader question of, I'm reminded of Dan McGowan recently wrote in Roadmap, and I talked about this in a keynote address that I gave. There are 3 Rhode Island crises that start with H: healthcare, higher ed, and housing. Oh. And underlying all of that, my argument, is a much broader H, which is humanity. And we found ourselves in a point where we are against humanity, it seems, as a society, when we have these types of things happening. Elle, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of set the problem with your own personal experience.
Absolutely. So my name is Lawliet Journey. I actually work at a children's hospital here in the state, and I am a tenant advocate. I work with Reclaim RI, and the way I came to them was because I was priced out of my home that I had been living in for 5 years. It had just been. I originally had worked with the original landlord who unfortunately passed away. When he passed away, it moved on to his son, and his son came in and priced us out of our home by raising the rents 70, 80, 90% for a lot of us, which was hundreds of dollars with only a 2 month notice. And I hate to say that I'm not the only one, because I have patients and coworkers. We're all people who care for the people of this state, and so many of us were scrambling and dealing with potential homelessness because not just the families that come in, but the doctors, the nurses, other medical staff here, we just couldn't afford to live anywhere in the state, and we still can't afford to live anywhere in the state right now.
Right. I mean, it's just such a fundamental problem. It's almost like, how are we doing anything else? I understand we've got these other crises, healthcare, so on and so forth, that are parallel and absolutely deserve our attention. But look, the slow movement of government on the response to the housing crisis, some would say it's just a condition of the nature of the beast. Others would say it's a fundamental failure of our system. Rep Cruz, you're on this legislation that we described at the top. Give us the rundown in understanding this problem, which is, hey, people rent an apartment, they rent a home, and there are capricious mechanics with which somebody can be forced out of their house based on, you know, just a decision to say, you know what, we're going to raise the rent, or we're going to look for a means to evict somebody without cause. And again, for the audience out there, because there are people probably hearing this right now who are homeowners or landlords, and you know what, there are scenarios where somebody ought to be evicted because they literally have not paid rent in an extended period of time, and there's no promise that they will pay their rent. And that's a fair assessment as well. We're not talking about that. We're not saying give everybody a house for free. Maybe we'll get there in a utopian society at some point. But Rep, just lay out the solution that you see available in this legislation.
Yeah, thank you for that. And absolutely. I just want to, before I get to that bill, real quick, is, in Lawliet's story, the son who took over lives out of state. He's in Florida, right? It's like, what was the justification? Nothing in that unit changed. There were no upgrades. There were still severe repairs that were needed. Yet you heard those increases.
Exactly.
And it was just the fact that, hey, the market, quote market, right?
Yep.
Who's doing this, right? So I just want to underscore that from when we began, that they're not even in our state. There's no justification. Um, and that's where we at. So again, there's lies the problem, the solution, right? How do we justify that, these rent increases? And that's where just causes it really works to stop these retaliatory unjustified rent hikes, right? So it's around when you ask for a repair. This law, what it does is really cements and gives you that defense that, hey, you can't just evict somebody because they ask for a repair. You're paying your rent, as you said. Bill, this is not about free homes for all, right? I mean, like you said, I hope to live to a day to see that. But the reality is, listen, people are paying their rent. They're working 40, 50, 60, 80 hours to pay that rent and doing it well, right? Living in units they lived in for decades. And this is about giving them some stability, right? Isn't that the old, I always like to say the landlords of old are gone. It's the
Mm,
landlords new. The landlords of old, which there's still them there, still here in our state. There are Rhode Islanders, there are small mom and pops. They'll tell you themselves, they've even testified at hearings. I want a good tenant and I want to keep them there forever and protect them. Then this just cause eviction legislation is for them, because they intuitively know that too, that if you're paying your rent and the tenant isn't violating their lease, why would they evict? Why would they change that? It's steady income, right? That's the landlord of old model. Sadly, the landlord of new model is profit, 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 and it's not about a person. It really isn't about It's about destabilizing communities. It's about their bottom line. It has nothing to do with protecting people from homelessness. It's actually driving our whole state cost up. So I really want to underscore that this is around a defense. So if somebody raises the rent over 4%, they can still do that, but it provides the tenant with the defense. If, like in Lawliet's example, that when that eviction time comes, she can let the court know, listen, I was paying my rent. I just couldn't handle a 700 increase in 60 days. And guess what I got for it? Nothing. If anything, I'm still living in an uninhabitable unit. So let's talk about that. And it gives them a defense for stability. So it really puts some guardrails, I believe, on these rent hikes, unjustified rent hikes.
What we have here is hypercapitalism. It's example one of many, many that we can find here, but where you just see a notion towards, well, you know what, let's worship billionaires. Let's celebrate Elon Musk or something because he's got, he's going to go to Mars. That's our North Star, instead of saying, let's look at collective well-being. How can we protect our community? Again, understanding. I have to say it again. You said it, Rep, as well. There's a huge difference here between operating within the current system and trying to change that system. Not to say that we ought not change the system, but this is just the functions of like how it ought to be in a true capitalistic environment, if that's what people want to operate in. What we have here isn't that. It's oligarchy. Let's be honest about it. And Elle, you experienced that firsthand. So when you look at a piece of legislation like this, we'll get to the likelihood of passage and amendments and so on and so forth in just a moment. But, do you feel like government is doing enough, has done enough? I think that's an obvious answer. But do you feel like there's some hope for folks that have been through a situation like you, that our government, our system actually will once again be by the people, for the people?
Bartholomew Town.
Are you ready to take the next step in your career? At URI Online, they offer business and leadership-focused programs designed to fit your life. Whether your goal is to advance your career in fields like public administration, supply chain management, or training and development, their online programs provide the flexibility you need with a high-quality education you deserve. Learn more from experienced faculty and collaborate with a network of professionals, all from the comfort of your home or wherever life takes you. Visit uri.edu/online to explore programs and start building your future today. URI Online. Learn anywhere with us. Birds are disappearing from our landscape at a rapid pace. Over 1/3 of those breeding on Audubon Society of Rhode Island's wildlife refuges are in decline. Climate change has taken a toll on their migration, nesting, and food sources. While science is highlighting the problem, Audubon is working on real solutions with a plan to rapidly reduce their carbon emissions. The organization will be free of fossil fuels by 2030, with renewable energy powering Audubon's buildings, equipment, and vehicles. To shape our future, all of us must act. Learn more about Repowering Audubon, their avian research, and how you can join their fight for climate resiliency. Visit asri.org/repower. Newport Film screens the latest critically acclaimed documentary films year-round across Rhode Island. Like a film festival, Newport Film often gets early access to films before they're available online or in theaters. Stay up to date on their latest screening events at newportfilm.com or on Instagram at newportfilm. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Yeah. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience, message, and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com.
Absolutely. When I see reps like Cherie and senators like Tiara Mack in our state, and they're out here pushing for just cause legislation to protect rental increases, and knowing that they're also renters, but not just that, like knowing the work that representatives that are really feet on the ground for these causes makes me hopeful that Rhode Island, which is right now in such a ridiculous state in regards of rentals, that maybe we'll be able to take back some of that stability. Because I remember when I was a kid, I really didn't see that many people homeless on the streets. There was a more supportive environment, whereas now it's everywhere and it's all I hear. And I know that their reps, when they're putting this legislation forward, it gives me hope that not only do they care, that like they're in the right positions. Because again, I'm just we've seen such a trend of political figures coming forward and not working for the people, even though that is their literal job. So seeing that tide coming forward, where people are trying, like different legislation is coming forward to support the actual people within the state, it does give me hope that the tide will change.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that there have been some significant steps forward when it comes to the suites of bills introduced by Speaker Shekarchi. Of course, those run into roadblocks when you have issues at the municipal level, be it Narragansett, be it my favorite example, Johnston, and what they're doing out there. But look, at the same time, the speaker's ethos, and in many ways he's correct, but it's supply and demand and production, production, production. Okay, very good. We can take a look at zoning. We can take a look at relationships with developers. We can take a look at refitting strip malls, whatever. But the bottom line is you can produce all you want. If people can't afford to live there, what good is it? So
Exactly.
that's the environment we're in right now. Rep, what's the appetite for this on Smith Hill? Do you get the sense that this legislation is going to pass? What's the Senate companion look like? And does this make its way through the executive office?
Yeah, I love Lawliet's hopefulness, and I'm going to keep that because I'm a Rhode Islander and I believe in it. And I think we're starting to get to a place where they're seeing. I felt like when I first was elected, and this is who I am. So this is how I came, and I came hard with rental application fees, and because like that's a scam. I've never seen that in my life. Wow, here it is. And I think it helped to wake some people up there on the Hill, right? They never really saw tenants. They never really heard from tenants. And what they do hear from, though, I'll assure you, is the big corporate landlords. And they have lots of money and they're in their ears a lot. So I'll leave it to, you don't know what you don't know, but now you know.
Hmm.
So now it's time that we need to act, and we have to be consistent and we have to be persistent. And so that gives me hope that when I see 50 to 100 tenants start to show up, that we are starting to turn that tide, and the passage, and to get it to that place of the passage. But I do know we really need, and I hope any listener who's a tenant, like we're not there yet. Like can't do it alone. It's a big house on Smith Hill, and again, there's a lot of corporate interest and money in this, and they are really up there, and we need to be up there, and they need to call their legislators. They need to let them know that this is the right thing to do. This is about fairness because we are building, but building takes time. And we need to stop the bleed right now. And that's what I look at this legislation and other pieces. You know what? This is something we can do now that costs us no money, but actually saves us money when it comes to homelessness prevention. And, it gives us time, right? Time to build because of all that investment in building. But again, if it's not affordable, it's not affordable. But we need to do something. And I think thinking about amendments and passages, one of the things pitched was even a sunset, right? Because you invested so much in building. All right, can we keep communities where they are? If they're paying their rent and they're not violating their lease, can we at least provide or secure them, right, as legislators, as public servants, with some fairness and stability until there is the supply and demand where we can equalize it and give people some sort of a chance and prevent homelessness in the meantime. So I want to say, I am hopeful. It's still a battle, and we need tenants and even our small mom and pops. I do not want to underscore, because they were the backbone of the community. They still are. When I meet mom and pops, they still keep their rent 800. Imagine under 1,000 for a 3-bedroom. They're still out here. They are out here, and those corporations are hurting them too.
Yeah.
And so we really need to, continue to do that and make sure we're clear on that narrative. And I think if we can do some of those things, we can really get this passed.
Yeah. It's so, there's so many tributaries here. Think about Hasbro. And look, there are a lot of reasons why Hasbro might be leaving. And look, Hasbro leaving. Okay, what are you going to do? They're leaving. They're going to Boston. Okay, enough already. I mean, we get it. It's disappointing. It shouldn't have happened. But one of the reasons they're leaving is workforce. And when you have a workforce that you can't have people who understand new media, that understand design, that understand the implementation of the systems, AI or otherwise, that a firm like Hasbro is looking to use, if you don't have those people in your state because they can't afford to live here, these aren't people who are able to, live on the Providence River in the apartments, overlooking the pedestrian bridge. I mean, let's be honest about it. You lose workforce opportunities and it's cyclical. And all of a sudden, from an economic development standpoint, you have a major, major crisis of workforce. And that's what we're seeing play out as well. The proof is in the pudding. Hasbro, just one example. What's going to happen in Middletown? We've got this new NOAA facility opening up and everything that's going to come with that. Well, no one can afford to live on Aquinic Island. So what are you going to drive in from, Coventry every day to go work there? No chance you're going to find a job that's more suited for your lifestyle. So this is so huge. It's humanity.
Right.
It's hypercapitalism.
Yeah.
Rep, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, and I want to, you really, Bill, you really hone it in, because to me, what I see or I think about when you just shared that is our wage does not match our rents. So how do we allow our rents to get so high if our wages aren't even going up? Everyday Rhode Islanders working have not seen an increase in their pay. So how, as us as a government, allowed rents to go so high unchecked? What did you think was going to happen? All right. We were going to see homelessness, or those who could leave, we could see leave. And no, we weren't going to have a workforce. We were going to have all these cyclical, events happening because of. So you really honed it in. I want to thank you for that. And that's what I see is like, that wage hasn't gone up. So we got to do something about this rent.
Couldn't agree more. Lastly, Elle, have you found stable housing in the wake of the traumatic experience? Which, by the way, there's another thing to talk about. How about the trauma that goes through that we put people through when this type of nonsense gets inserted into their lives? It's difficult enough to be a human being, never mind in 2025. Now you get some greedy, hyper-capitalistic driven landlord giving you the boot on top of all that. That's traumatic. Have you been able to recover in both the mental health sense and in a practical sense of finding housing?
So I will say, in a practical sense, for my actual housing, I luckily have a resource, which is I have, living family members that I get along with. So I actually had to move back home with my mother, which is not something everyone has. A lot of my former tenants that I used to live with were retirees, or they were on disability, and but a majority of them were elderly, so they don't have that resource like me, where I now have to live with my mother again, even though I moved out at 18 years old and I was able to afford living on my own since 18, and now all of a sudden I'm back in. But so luckily I do have housing, but for a apartment that is actually slightly smaller than every apartment I've ever lived in, and I'm paying double the amount I ever did before. And in a mental health sense, not really, because there's still so much paranoia behind it, and there's still so much paranoia that, my rent at my new place is going to go up randomly just like it was before, and then I'll be ousted again.
Yeah.
Because
And
it's the same as an eviction notice. It really is.
Yeah. Bill, and I'll add, one of Lawliet's neighbors She was, a senior, a recent widow. Her husband, 40 years, worked for the state, right? Gave his life to our state. She's still working in her, in her senior years, working and supporting families, going through the same thing, was displaced, in tears, now on a couch in a front room with her family members and her grandkids, and is just in tears every day of how did this happen. She's like, I get a $50 increase, I get 100, but nothing's changed. How did it go up so high? She's on her husband, or she's a widow, her dead husband's pension. She has to work a second job. She's a senior all her life in Rhode Island, grew up over there by Smith Hill, and then started her family in Cranston. And this is how we as elected officials or public servants like protect. And I'm like, this can't be happening. This cannot be allowed. And we really have to do something, because it is the trauma, and she is going through trauma, and the whole family feels it. It's generational.
It's a disgrace. Luckily, there's public servants who understand that there's hope and there are ways to attack this problem. It's going to take a much more macro assessment of our overall society, though, to get out of this jam, if we're able to. Rep L, thank you both so much for sharing and for the work that you're doing. It couldn't be more fundamental. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a disgrace. I've been through this. Had an amazing apartment I was renting in Newport. All of a sudden, woman dies. Wonderful, benevolent woman. Guy swoops in. He's got political connections, buys the house, gives everybody the boot, turns it into an Airbnb. And, the disruption to community, that was in 2018. We still feel that pain today, that disruption, that one particular house getting taken out of reach for anybody. I mean, we're talking about people. We're not talking about, again, for the millionth time today, because there's so many naysayers that say, oh, well, we can't have free housing. All right, enough of that conversation, because this is not what we're talking about. So get out of that lane and get focused on the reality. And I thank you both for sharing the actual reality today.
Thank you, because that story you shared is not an anomaly. It's happening every day, Bill, whether it's an Airbnb or they do what they had done to a Lawliet. It's happening every single day.
Exactly. We're not asking for free housing. We're asking for safe, affordable housing of stable communities. That's really it. So thank you so much for having us.
Of course. Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram @BillBartholomew.